diseased ideology can set not just a nation, but the entire world ablaze. Adolf Hitler, a man who rose from the depths of crisis, captivated hearts with his words and claimed millions of lives with his actions. After Germany's defeat in World War I, the Treaty of Versailles humiliated the nation and crippled its economy. Massive unemployment, rampant inflation, and widespread distrust in the government pushed society toward embracing extremist promises. In this turbulent atmosphere, Hitler, a former soldier, joined the German Workers' Party and transformed it into the National Socialist Party, or the Nazi Party. With his skill in oratory and mastery of propaganda, he portrayed himself as the savior of the nation. In January 1933, Hitler became chancellor and swiftly seized absolute power through the passage of the Enabling Act. Political opponents were suppressed, the media came under state control, and the ideology of Aryan racial superiority became the backbone of the regime. In September 1939, with the invasion of Poland, the spark of World War II was ignited. The German army, using the Blitzkrieg or lightning war tactic, occupied large parts of Europe in a short time. But behind these military victories, a sinister plan was unfolding. The final solution to exterminate Europe's Jews. The Holocaust, through forced labor camps and mass executions, claimed the lives of 6 million Jews and millions of other victims, including Roma, the disabled, and political dissidents. In total, World War II left more than 70 million dead. Hitler's policies turned Europe into a wasteland. Cities were destroyed, millions were displaced, and the political map of the world was redrawn. Germany was divided into East and West, and the world entered the Cold War era. The United Nations was established to prevent the recurrence of such catastrophes. In April 1945, as Allied forces approached Berlin and the fall of the Third Reich became imminent, Hitler ended his life in his underground bunker. His body and that of his wife, Eva Braun, were burned to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Fear was the main pillar of his empire, an empire built upon the bones of millions. After the death of Vladimir Lenin in 1924, the Soviet Union was plunged into a power struggle among the leaders of the Communist Party. Joseph Stalin, who initially held the seemingly limited administrative role of General Secretary, used political skill and unprecedented ruthlessness to eliminate his rivals one by one. He presented himself as the true heir to the October Revolution and promised to transform the Soviet Union into an industrial and military superpower. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, Stalin launched the 5-year plans for rapid industrialization and the collectivization of agriculture. These policies, enforced through coercion and violence, triggered widespread famines. The most catastrophic was the Holodomor in Ukraine, which claimed between 3 and 7 million lives. At the same time, the Great Purges began. Using the NKVD secret police, Stalin executed hundreds of thousands on charges of treason or opposition to the party. Millions more were sent to the Gulag forced labor camps, where many perished from hunger, disease, or exhausting labor. Even the Red Army was not spared. Senior generals were executed or imprisoned, weakening the Soviet Union's defensive capabilities at the outset of World War II. Stalin's policies turned the Soviet Union into an industrial and military power, but at the cost of millions of its citizens' lives. A culture of fear and surveillance became ingrained in society, and any form of dissent, even in private, could lead to death or exile. On the international stage, the Soviet Union emerged as one of the world's 2 superpowers, but with a face that was both inspiring and terrifying. Stalin remained in power until his final days. He died of a stroke on March 5, 1953. His death brought a wave of political change, but his repressive legacy cast a shadow over the Soviet Union for decades. In a country whose population had surpassed 1 billion, a single wrong decision could alter the fate of millions. Mao Zedong, the undisputed leader of Communist China, demonstrated this truth to the world in a tragic way. After the Communist Party's victory in the Chinese Civil War in 1949, Mao presented himself as the architect of a new China. He promised to transform the nation from medieval poverty and backwardness into a modern industrial power. But this ambition was fused with extreme ideology and ruthless politics. Mao not only eliminated political opponents, but also branded any critical voice as an enemy of the revolution. In 1958, Mao launched a program known as the Great Leap Forward. Its goal was rapid industrialization and increased agricultural output. However, unscientific policies, the forced mobilization of peasants into feudal projects, and falsified reports from local officials led to one of the greatest human tragedies of the 20th century, the Great Chinese Famine. Between 1959 and 1962, an estimated 30 to 45 million people died from hunger and malnutrition. Before the wounds of this disaster had healed, Mao, in 1966, initiated the Cultural Revolution. Millions of students and young people, under the banner of the Red Guards, took to the streets to purge counter-revolutionary elements. Teachers, intellectuals, and even Communist Party members whose loyalty was questioned were humiliated, tortured, or executed. Libraries were burned, historical artifacts destroyed, and Chinese society plunged into chaos. These two events not only claimed millions of lives, but also shattered China's social and cultural fabric. Trust among people disintegrated, families were torn apart, and generations grew up in fear and silence. On the international stage, China became an isolated and unpredictable nation. Despite these catastrophes, Mao remained in power until his death on September 9, 1976. After his death, the Communist Party gradually abandoned some of his policies, yet Mao's image continued to appear on China's banknotes and walls. In the 1970s, Cambodia was mired in civil war and political instability. The communist forces known as the Khmer Rouge, led by Saloth Sar, later known as Pol Pot, won the support of part of the population with promises of absolute equality and a return to agricultural roots. His ideology was a blend of extreme communism, nationalism, and isolationism, viewing any foreign influence or urban culture as the enemy. In April 1975, the Khmer Rouge entered Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia. Just days later, Pol Pot ordered the complete evacuation of the cities. Millions of people, including hospital patients, were forced to walk for kilometers to rural areas. The goal was to create a self-sufficient agrarian society, but in practice, this policy led to forced labor, starvation, and mass death. Any sign of education, religion, or urban culture was considered a crime. Teachers, doctors, Buddhist monks, ethnic and religious minorities, and even those who wore glasses were executed as enemies of the revolution. The Tuol Sleng prison, S21, became a symbol of the regime's terror. Thousands were killed there under brutal torture. During Pol Pot's 4-year rule, an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people, about 1/4 of the country's population, lost their lives. Cambodia was devastated demographically, culturally, and economically. Families were torn apart, infrastructure was destroyed, and deep psychological scars were left on society. This tragedy made Cambodia's name synonymous with genocide for years to come. In 1979, the Vietnamese army invaded Cambodia and overthrew the Khmer Rouge regime. Pol Pot fled to the jungle and lived in border areas under the protection of his remaining forces until the end of his life. He was never tried in an international court and died in 1998. One country, one leader, one ideology, and millions of starving people whose voices never reached the world. After the end of World War II and the division of the Korean Peninsula into northern and southern halves, Kim Il-sung rose to power with the backing of the Soviet Union and China. He called himself the Great Leader and established the ideology of Juche, a philosophy that emphasized absolute self-reliance and complete national isolation. This ideology became a pretext for total control over the lives of the people and the elimination of any foreign influence. In 1950, Kim Il-sung launched an invasion of South Korea, starting the Korean War, a conflict that lasted 3 years and left millions dead or wounded. After the armistice, he turned the country into a one-party dictatorship in which the Workers' Party of Korea and the leader himself dominated every aspect of life. His decades in power were marked by total political repression, forced labor camps, and strict media control. Any form of dissent, even in private, could lead to arrest, torture, or execution. In the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the reduction of foreign aid, North Korea entered one of the deadliest famines of the century. Known as the Arduous March, it claimed between 240,000 and 3.5 million lives. Instead of accepting large-scale international aid, the government continued to insist on self-reliance and isolation. Kim Il-sung's policies turned North Korea into one of the most isolated and repressive countries in the world. Generations grew up in an atmosphere of state propaganda, fear, and chronic food shortages. Kim Il-sung died on July 8, 1994, but before his death, he had transferred power to his son, Kim Jong-il. Share your thoughts with us, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.